Medieval England was a world of rigid hierarchy, where every person had their designated place in the great chain of being. Kings ruled by divine right, nobles commanded through birthright, and peasants toiled in predetermined servitude. Yet within this inflexible structure existed one of history's most paradoxical figures, the court jester. These colourfully dressed entertainers possessed a unique privilege that even the highest nobles envied, the freedom to speak truth to power, wrapped in the protective cloak of humour. The medieval jester was far more than a simple entertainer. They served as counsellors, messengers, political commentators, and cultural preservationists, all rolled into one jingling, motley-clad package. In an age where direct criticism of authority could mean death, jesters found ways to deliver harsh truths through clever wordplay, satirical songs, and seemingly innocent stories. They walked a constant tightrope between entertainment and execution, their very survival dependent on their ability to make the powerful laugh at their own follies without realizing they were being mocked. But the jester's world was ending. Political upheaval, religious reformation, and changing social attitudes were already beginning to erode the place of humour in royal courts. What had once been valued as necessary truth-telling would soon be seen as dangerous frivolity. The Civil War and rise of Puritan influence would ultimately spell doom for these medieval truth-tellers. Now then, everyone spread out your blankets, close your eyes, and listen to me tell the story. Let your mind drift back through the centuries, past our modern world of electric lights and motor cars, past the age of revolution and discovery, back to a time when castles dotted the landscape and kings claimed to rule by God's own will. Feel the rough wool of medieval clothing against your skin, smell the wood smoke and rushes of ancient halls, hear the distant sound of church bells marking the hours of a world ruled by tradition and fear. You open your eyes, and you are no longer yourself. You are Thomas the Fool, court jester to King Henry, and your life hangs by the thread of your wit. You wake in darkness, as you always do, your body trained to rouse itself before the castle stirs. Your chamber is small, but privileged. Most servants sleep in communal quarters, sharing straw mattresses and whatever warmth they can find. As the king's fool, you merit your own space, barely 6 feet wide and 8 feet long, tucked beneath a stone staircase near the great hall. The walls are thick Norman stone, perpetually damp, despite the brazier that burns low in the corner, casting dancing shadows across your few possessions. Your motley hangs on a wooden peg driven into the mortar between stones, the iconic party-coloured garment that marks you as something other than normal humanity, half bright yellow, half deep red, with sleeves that end in peaked points adorned with silver bells. The fabric is fine wool, far better than what any peasant might wear, yet the colours make you instantly recognisable as a figure of fun rather than respect. Beside it hangs your cap, a soft peaked affair, with more bells and a coxcomb of red fabric that flops when you move your head. The bells are your trademark and your curse. Every movement announces your presence with a soft chiming that follows you like an auditory shadow. In daylight, they serve your performances, adding musical punctuation to your jokes and making your tumbling routines sound festive. But in the pre-dawn darkness, as you try to move quietly through your morning preparations, they seem to mock your attempts at stealth. You light a thick tallow candle from the brazier's coals, the flame guttering and spitting as it catches. The light reveals your other tools of trade, a small lute with a crack down its soundboard that you've never had properly repaired, a set of juggling balls made from leather pouches filled with dried beans, a collection of carved wooden masks for impromptu dramatic performances, and most importantly, a leather-bound journal where you record your observations, jokes, stories, and the dangerous political intelligence that flows through the castle like water through stone. This journal is your most precious and perilous possession. Written in a cipher of your own devising, part Latin, part French, part symbols you've invented, it contains everything from innocent rhymes to treasonous observations about the king's policies, the queen's suspected infidelities, and the various plots that simmer beneath the surface of court life. If discovered and decoded, it would mean your death. Yet, without it, you would be merely a tumbler and joke-teller rather than the political commentator and truth speaker your role demands. The castle is beginning to stir around you. Through your narrow window, you can see servants crossing the courtyard with their dawn duties, milkmaids heading to the cowsheds, kitchen boys stoking fires, stable hands preparing for the day's work. Soon the great hall will fill with the breakfast crowd, and you must be ready with fresh entertainment, new jokes, carefully prepared observations disguised as innocent humour. But first, you must prepare yourself mentally for another day of walking the knife's edge between truth and survival. Your morning routine is as carefully choreographed as any court dance, each element designed to transform you from Thomas the Man into Thomas the Fool. A transformation that is part physical preparation, part psychological protection, and part spiritual armor against the day's dangers. You begin with your body, performing the stretching and limbering exercises that keep your aging joints flexible enough for the physical demands of your profession. At 42, you're old for a jester. Most entertainers are young men whose energy and fearlessness serve them well in the dangerous game of court humour. Your survival to middle age speaks to either exceptional skill or extraordinary luck, though you suspect it's a combination of both, seasoned with a healthy dose of divine providence. The stretches hurt more each morning, particularly in your left shoulder where you landed badly during a tumbling routine 3 years ago and never properly healed. The joint clicks and grinds as you work it through its range of motion, but you persist. Physical comedy is still a significant part of your arsenal, and the court expects their fool to be as agile as he is clever. A jester who cannot tumble, juggle, and cavort is like a knight who cannot ride, technically possible, but professionally insufficient. Your face receives particular attention as you prepare for the day's performance. Using a small mirror of polished metal, you practice the expressions that are your stock in trade, the wide-eyed look of innocent confusion that allows you to ask dangerous questions, the knowing smirk that suggests hidden knowledge without explicitly stating it, the theatrical grimaces and exaggerated emotions that punctuate your physical comedy. Most importantly, you practice your fool's face. Do say the carefully crafted expression of simple-minded good nature that allows you to say things that would be treason from anyone else's lips. This expression has saved your life more times than you can count, transforming pointed political commentary into the innocent babblings of a harmless simpleton. The king and his courtiers laugh at your apparently naive observations about policy and politics, never suspecting that your foolishness is more carefully calculated than their wisdom. Your voice requires preparation as well. You run through vocal exercises, warming up the different accents and speech patterns you employ in your various characters. There's the high, piping voice of the mock-innocent peasant, the pompous tones of the self-important noble, the wheedling cadence of the corrupt merchant, and dozens of others. Each voice is a tool, and you must keep them all sharp and ready for use. The mental preparation is perhaps most crucial of all. You review your plans for the day's entertainment, considering what messages you need to convey, what tensions you might need to diffuse, what dangerous truths require the protective coating of humour before they can be safely spoken aloud. Your position gives you access to information that flows through the castle, servants' gossip, snippets of conversation overheard in corridors, the body language and expressions of nobles during formal occasions. All of this intelligence must be processed, analysed, and transformed into entertainment that serves multiple masters. The king's need for amusement, the court's hunger for distraction, your own survival instincts, and the larger cause of truth-telling in an age when direct honesty can be fatal. As you don your motley, the transformation begins in earnest. The moment the party-coloured fabric settles over your shoulders and the bells begin their familiar chiming, Thomas the man begins to fade and Thomas the fool emerges. The costume is not merely clothing but armour, psychological protection that allows you to speak and act in ways that would be impossible in normal dress. The bells announce that what follows is performance, not personal opinion, creating a buffer zone of theatrical distance between your words and their consequences. Before you can plan your day's entertainment, you must take the pulse of the castle, reading the subtle signs and signals that will determine whether this is a day for gentle humour or sharp observation, for political commentary or safer entertainment. The castle in early morning is like a great organism awakening, and you have learned to interpret its vital signs with the skill of a physician. Your first intelligence comes from the servants, the invisible army of workers who keep the great household functioning. As you make your way through the service corridors toward the great hall, you observe and listen with the attention of a spy. The kitchen maid's chatter tells you about the previous night's activities in the noble quarters, who entertained whom, which voices were raised in anger, what messengers arrived under cover of darkness. Dame Margaret, the head cook, is your most reliable source of information. A woman of 60, with the authority that comes from 3 decades of feeding the royal household, she knows everything that happens within these walls. Her greeting this morning is curt, her usual warmth replaced by tight-lipped efficiency. This tells you that tensions are high, that something has disturbed the normal rhythms of castle life. Morning's bread is burned, she mutters as you pass through her domain, using the coded language you've developed over years of careful communication. Burned bread means bad news from the king's private chambers. Had to start the ovens twice, she adds, indicating that whatever disturbed the night was serious enough to affect the morning's routine. You nod understanding and move on, filing this intelligence away for future use. The burned bread might become a jest about the fickleness of fortune. The twice-started ovens might inspire a song about perseverance in the face of adversity. Everything you observe can potentially be transformed into entertainment, but the art lies in knowing how much transformation is required to make dangerous truths safe for public consumption. The Great Hall itself provides another layer of information. The servants, preparing for breakfast, move with unusual haste, their usual morning banter replaced by focused efficiency. Fresh rushes have been scattered on the floor, not the weekly renewal that's customary, but an unscheduled cleaning that suggests important visitors or particular concern for appearances. The high table has been set with the good silver rather than the everyday pewter, confirming that today will bring formal occasions requiring careful navigation. Most telling of all are the guards. The usual complement of men-at-arms has been supplemented with additional soldiers, their presence subtle but unmistakable to your trained eye. They stand at seemingly casual posts throughout the hall, but you recognize the patterns of increased security. Someone important is expected, or someone dangerous is anticipated. The morning light, streaming through the high windows, carries its own messages. Clear sunlight would suggest a day suitable for outdoor activities, hunting parties, or garden entertainments where your role might be less central. But today brings the grey, diffused light of an overcast sky, the kind of weather that keeps the court indoors and increases your importance as provider of indoor entertainment. You position yourself in an alcove where you can observe the arrival of the court's early risers without being immediately noticed. The younger courtiers arrive first, their energy undiminished by whatever tensions affect their elders. They provide a useful baseline for comparison. Their easy laughter and casual conversation tell you that whatever disturbed the night hasn't filtered down to the junior levels of the hierarchy. The arrival of the senior nobles paints a different picture entirely. Lord Edmund, the king's treasurer, enters with the harried look of a man who has spent the night with his account books, his usual morning humour replaced by preoccupied anxiety. Lady Catherine, the Queen's closest companion, moves with the careful grace of someone navigating treacherous political waters. Her smiles a shade too bright, her greetings a touch too formal. Most revealing of all is the arrival of Sir Robert, the King's chief counsellor and your most dangerous audience. A man of keen intelligence and limited patience for frivolity, Sir Robert tolerates your presence because the King enjoys your performances, but his approval or disapproval can dramatically affect your safety. This morning he surveys the hall with the calculating gaze of a general assessing a battlefield, and when his eyes briefly meet yours, you see neither humour nor hostility, but something more unsettling, a kind of resigned wariness that suggests he knows difficult decisions lie ahead. All of this intelligence must be processed and integrated into your performance plans within minutes. The court expects their fool to be ready with entertainment the moment the king appears, and your ability to read and respond to the castle's mood is what separates competent jesters from those who find themselves seeking new employment or facing executioner's blocks. The herald's trumpet announces the king's approach with 3 clear notes that slice through the morning chatter like a blade through silk. Instantly, the great hall transforms from a place of casual social interaction to a formal court, conversations dying mid-sentence as every person present turns toward the royal entrance with expressions of practiced reverence. You feel the familiar tightening in your chest that accompanies the king's arrival, part anticipation, part fear, part excitement at the dangerous game about to begin. King Henry enters with the measured pace of absolute authority, his presence filling the hall despite his relatively modest physical stature. At 58, he carries himself with the confident bearing of a man who has never seriously questioned his right to rule, yet you notice the subtle signs of strain that mark his features. The lines around his eyes have deepened since winter, and there's a tightness to his jaw that suggests the weight of crown and responsibility are pressing more heavily than usual. The royal party follows in strict order of precedence. Queen Eleanor, her beauty carefully maintained despite her 43 years, moving with the gliding grace that marks high nobility. The royal children, ranging from 16-year-old Prince Edward, already showing signs of his future kingly bearing, down to 8-year-old Princess Margaret, whose eyes immediately seek you out with the uncomplicated pleasure that only children can show for their favourite entertainer. Behind the royal family come the great officers of the household, the ministers of state and the favoured courtiers whose proximity to power marks their current standing in the complex web of court politics. You read their faces like a manuscript, noting who stands closer to the king than usual, who seems to have fallen from favour, whose expressions suggest they carry important intelligence or pressing concerns. As the king takes his place at the high table, the entire hall executes a synchronized bow, a forest of bent heads and bowed backs, acknowledging the divine authority that medieval kingship claims to embody. You perform your own version of this obeisance, but with the exaggerated flourishes that mark your performance as entertainment rather than genuine submission. A cartoonish bow so deep that your bells chime against the floor stones, followed by an elaborate straightening process that involves mock difficulty in regaining your balance. The performance serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges the king's authority while slightly mocking the ceremony itself, provides a moment of levity to break the formal tension, and immediately establishes your presence in the hall as the designated entertainer. Most importantly, it signals your availability to provide whatever service the royal mood might require. King Henry's reaction tells you everything you need to know about the day ahead. Instead of his usual appreciative chuckle at your theatrical entrance, he offers only the thinnest of smiles, a polite acknowledgement that lacks genuine warmth. His attention immediately turns to Sir Robert, with whom he engages in the kind of intense, whispered conversation that suggests matters of state are pressing more urgently than usual. This is clearly not a morning for elaborate entertainment or extended performance. Your role today will require subtlety and sensitivity rather than broad comedy. You must be ready to provide distraction when needed, counsel when requested, and perhaps most challengingly, comic relief that doesn't trivialize genuinely serious concerns. The Queen's reaction provides another crucial piece of information. Eleanor's eyes find yours across the hall, and in that brief glance you read a mixture of warning and appeal. She knows something about the morning's tensions that makes her concerned about your potential involvement, yet her look also suggests that your services may be particularly needed today. The Queen has always been more astute about political undercurrents than her husband, and her concern puts you on high alert. Young Prince Edward's presence adds another layer of complexity to your calculations. At 16, he's old enough to understand political tensions, but young enough to still enjoy your performances. However, his position as heir to the throne means that your interactions with him carry particular weight. Any jest that might be seen as undermining his authority or dignity could have serious consequences for your future relationship with the monarchy. Princess Margaret's excitement at your presence provides the only uncomplicated element in the hall's emotional landscape. Her obvious delight in your appearance offers both an opportunity for safe entertainment and a potential refuge if the political currents become too dangerous to navigate directly. Children's laughter has a way of diffusing adult tensions, and the princess's genuine affection for your performances has saved you from more than one awkward moment in the past. As breakfast service begins, and the hall settles into its morning rhythms, you position yourself where you can observe the royal table without intruding on their conversation. Your presence must be felt without being intrusive, available without being demanding. The art of the court jester lies as much in knowing when not to perform as in knowing how to entertain. Your first formal performance of the day serves the dual purpose of providing entertainment and gathering the intelligence you need to navigate the complex political waters of court life. You begin with a seemingly innocent routine about a travelling merchant who brings news from distant lands, a formula that allows you to introduce real information disguised as fictional entertainment. "My lords and ladies," you announce, your voice carrying the sing-song quality that marks the beginning of a jester's tale. "I bring you word of a merchant most peculiar, who claims to have travelled from the far corners of our realm, bearing the strangest of goods." The routine begins with physical comedy as you mime the merchant's journey, stumbling under the weight of an invisible pack, shading your eyes to peer at imaginary landmarks, wiping sweat from your brow after crossing fictional rivers. The courtiers smile at your antics, but you're watching their faces for reactions to the intelligence you're about to introduce. "From the north," you continue, "he brings wool that spins itself into complaints about taxes." This draws genuine laughter from the younger courtiers, but you notice Lord Edmund's expression tighten slightly. The royal treasurer's reaction confirms that the northern territories are indeed causing fiscal concern, just as Dame Margaret's kitchen intelligence suggested. From the west, he carries fish that swim upstream, bearing messages of loyalty. Here, you exaggerate swimming motions, flopping about the floor in a manner that brings delighted laughter from Princess Margaret. But the real message is for those who can read it. The Western lords are sending assurances of continued support, probably in response to some challenge to royal authority. And from the east, you say, lowering your voice conspiratorially, he brings grain that whispers secrets about neighbouring kingdoms. Your theatrical whisper carries just far enough to reach the king's ears, and you see his attention sharpen slightly. This is your opening to introduce the morning's most important intelligence. You launch into an elaborate pantomime of examining grain, holding imaginary kernels up to your ear, nodding sagely at their supposed whispers. The performance is ridiculous enough to maintain the comedic tone while allowing you to deliver potentially serious information about foreign affairs. The grain speaks of French merchants seeking English wool at prices that make our shepherds dance with joy. This brings murmurs of interest from the commercial-minded courtiers. Favourable trade with France is always welcome news, and your comic delivery makes it seem like a cause for celebration rather than careful diplomatic negotiation. But the wheat warns that Scottish raids continue in the borderlands, where farmers sleep with one eye open and their pitchforks sharpened. The shift in tone is subtle but significant. Scottish border raids are a serious military concern, and your delivery acknowledges their gravity while maintaining the fictional framework that protects you from accusations of spreading alarming intelligence. King Henry's reaction to this information tells you everything you need to know about the morning's tensions. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, and he exchanges a meaningful glance with his military advisors. The Scottish situation is clearly more serious than public knowledge suggests, and your performance has just confirmed that the king knows you have access to intelligence sources beyond official channels. You conclude the merchant routine with a flourish of juggling, tossing your leather balls high in the air while spinning a tale about the merchant's final treasure. Wisdom that bounces like balls and can be caught by those quick enough to grasp it. The metaphor is clear enough for those who understand. Valuable intelligence is available for those clever enough to interpret your performances correctly. As the balls descend into your waiting hands, you notice subtle shifts in the courtier's attention patterns. Those with political sophistication are processing the information you've delivered, while the less astute simply enjoyed the entertainment. Sir Robert's expression suggests he's already considering how to incorporate your intelligence into the morning's planning sessions. The performance accomplished its primary objectives. You've demonstrated your value as an information source, tested the court's current concerns, and established yourself as a necessary presence for the day ahead. Most importantly, you've done all this while providing genuine entertainment that justifies your position and maintains your protective status as harmless fool rather than dangerous spy. But the game has only just begun, and the reactions to your morning routine tell you that today will require all your skill to navigate safely through whatever political storms are brewing within the castle walls. Following your morning performance, Queen Eleanor approaches with the gliding grace that marks her movements, but her smile carries an undercurrent of concern that only you, and perhaps her closest confidants, would recognize. In the complex dance of court protocol, her approach represents both honour and danger, the privilege of royal attention balanced against the increased scrutiny that comes with proximity to power. "Thomas," she says, her voice pitched to carry just far enough to be heard by nearby courtiers without seeming secretive, "Princess Margaret has been asking for the story of the clever miller's daughter. Perhaps you might entertain her in the solar this morning?" The request sounds casual, even maternal, But you understand immediately that this is a command disguised as a suggestion, and that the story itself carries specific meaning. The Clever Miller's Daughter is a tale you've developed over years of service, one that serves as coded communication for discussions about political strategy and feminine influence in a male-dominated power structure. The Queen's request for this particular story tells you that she needs to discuss matters too sensitive for the public hall, using the presence of her youngest daughter as both cover and protection. You execute a theatrical bow that brings appreciative chuckles from the nearby courtiers. My gracious Queen, nothing would delight me more than to tell tales to our dear princess. Though I warn you, the Clever Miller's Daughter has learned new tricks since last we heard her adventures. Your response acknowledges the coded nature of the request while maintaining the fiction of simple entertainment. The Royal Solar is a private chamber reserved for the Queen's personal use, smaller and more intimate than the public spaces of the castle. Here, Eleanor can speak more freely, surrounded by her chosen ladies, in waiting and away from the male-dominated political atmosphere of the Great Hall. But even here, absolute privacy is impossible, and your conversation will require careful choreography to avoid suspicious appearances. Princess Margaret's genuine excitement at your arrival provides perfect cover for the adult conversation that needs to occur. As she settles beside you with the unself-conscious affection that only children display, you begin the story with the theatrical gestures and voices that mark your public performances, while watching the Queen's face for the signals that will tell you when to incorporate her real concerns into the narrative. Once upon a time, you begin, your voice taking on the sing-song cadence of storytelling. There lived a miller's daughter who was known throughout the land for her cleverness. But her father, the miller, worried that her intelligence might be seen as dangerous by those who preferred their women to be decorative rather than wise. The parallel to Queen Eleanor's own position is clear enough. As one of the most politically astute women in the kingdom, she must constantly balance her genuine influence with the appearance of proper feminine submission to male authority. Her intelligence is simultaneously her greatest asset and her most dangerous liability. The king of that land, you continue, your voice taking on slightly more serious tones while maintaining the storytelling framework, faced troubles with his borders, where neighbouring kingdoms sent raiders to test his strength. Princess Margaret listens with rapt attention, but you see the Queen's slight nod, acknowledging the reference to the Scottish border situation. The king's advisers argued among themselves about the best response, you continue, using different voices for the various councillors, the pompous tones of those who favour military action, the wheedling notes of those who prefer diplomatic solutions, the worried tenor of those concerned about costs. But the miller's daughter observed that while the men debated, the raids continued, and the common people suffered. Here you pause, allowing Princess Margaret to ask the expected question. What did the clever daughter do, Thomas? Her innocent inquiry provides the opening for the Queen's real concerns to be addressed within the story's framework. Ah, you say, leaning forward conspiratorially. The clever daughter suggested that perhaps the king should listen to those who actually lived near the borders, rather than only to those who viewed the problem from the safety of the castle. She proposed that sometimes the best intelligence comes from unexpected sources, merchants, travellers, even village women who observe more than they're credited with seeing. Queen Eleanor's almost imperceptible smile tells you that you've understood her concern correctly. The king's formal advisers may be missing crucial information about the Scottish situation, information that could be gathered through informal channels if anyone bothered to ask the right questions of the right people. The story continues for another quarter hour, weaving together entertainment for the princess with coded communication about intelligence gathering, resource allocation, and the delicate balance between decisive action and diplomatic patience. Through it all, you maintain the dual performance that defines your profession. Genuine storyteller for the child, political counselor for the adult, and harmless fool for any observers who might question your presence in the Queen's private chambers. Your return to the Great Hall brings you face to face with the day's central challenge: how to address the Scottish border situation that clearly has the court on edge, while maintaining the protective fiction of harmless entertainment. The King's conversation with his military advisers has grown more intense during your absence, their lowered voices and serious expressions confirming that the situation is more grave than public knowledge suggests. You begin with a seemingly innocent routine about a shepherd who must protect his flock from wolves, a metaphor transparent enough for the politically astute while remaining safe entertainment for casual observers. But as you develop the performance, you notice Sir Robert's increasingly sharp attention, warning you that you're approaching the boundaries of acceptable commentary. This shepherd, my lords, you announce with theatrical concern, faced a most peculiar problem. The wolves had learned to howl like sheep. Your voice rises with mock alarm, and you demonstrate the deceptive howling with exaggerated sound effects that bring laughter from the younger courtiers. But the metaphor cuts close to the bone: Scottish raiders disguising themselves as peaceful traders or travellers. The shepherd's neighbours advised him to trust his ears rather than his eyes. You continue, your tone growing more serious despite the comic framework. But our clever shepherd replied, "When wolves learn to bleat like lambs, wise shepherds learn to see through their ears and hear through their eyes." The performance allows you to suggest that traditional approaches to border security may be inadequate against enemies who use deception as their primary weapon. But Sir Robert's expression has grown dangerously stern, and you realise you're walking too close to the edge of acceptable political commentary. You quickly shift the routine towards safer ground, introducing physical comedy as the shepherd attempts to distinguish between real sheep and disguised wolves. Your exaggerated pantomime of sniffing, listening, and peering suspiciously at imaginary livestock draws genuine laughter and provides breathing room for the political tensions your words have raised. But King Henry's reaction tells you that your message has been received and understood. His glance toward his military advisers carries new urgency, and you see him making the mental connections that your performance was designed to suggest. The Scottish problem requires more sophisticated solutions than traditional military responses. The shepherd's solution, you conclude with a flourish, was to teach his sheep new calls, signals that no wolf could imitate because they required not just sound but understanding. The suggestion of improved communication and coordination between border communities is clear enough for those who need to understand it, while remaining vague enough to avoid accusations of interfering in military policy. Your performance succeeds in its immediate objectives. You've delivered valuable intelligence about enemy tactics while maintaining plausible deniability, provided entertainment that justifies your presence, and demonstrated your value as an advisor who can see problems from perspectives that formal counsellors might miss. But success in the jester's profession is always temporary, and you're acutely aware that your increasing involvement in serious political matters is raising your profile in ways that could prove dangerous. The more valuable you become as an advisor, the more threatening you appear to those who prefer their counsel to come through official channels. As applause for your performance dies away, you notice subtle shifts in the courtiers' behaviour toward you. Some seem more respectful, recognizing your growing influence, while others appear more wary, perhaps resenting a fool's intrusion into serious matters of state. The delicate balance of your position requires constant recalibration, and today's events have shifted that balance in ways you're only beginning to understand. the great hall transforms for the midday meal into a stage for elaborate political theatre, where every seating arrangement, every gesture, every conversation carries meaning beyond its surface appearance. As the royal household and visiting dignitaries gather for the formal feast, your role shifts from entertainer to social lubricant, using humour to ease tensions and facilitate conversations that might otherwise prove too awkward or dangerous for direct address. Today's feast carries special significance because of the morning's intelligence about Scottish raids and French trade negotiations. Foreign ambassadors occupy places of honour, their presence requiring careful diplomatic navigation that your performances can help facilitate. The French delegation, led by the sophisticated Comte de Montfort, represents opportunities for profitable alliance, while the Scottish envoy, the gruff Lord MacLeod, embodies the complex tensions of the northern border. You position yourself where you can observe and respond to the subtle dynamics playing out across the high table. King Henry's greeting to Lord MacLeod is correct but cool, their handshake lasting precisely long enough to satisfy protocol without suggesting genuine warmth. The Scottish lord's eyes are hard, suggesting he knows more about the border situation than he's prepared to discuss openly. Your first intervention comes when conversation threatens to stall between the French comte and several English nobles who seem overawed by his continental sophistication. You approach with a routine about a pig who learned to speak French, using exaggerated accents and pompous airs to gently mock pretension while celebrating actual accomplishment. Mais seigneur, you begin in deliberately imperfect French. Permettez-moi to tell you of the pig most remarkable. Your theatrical French accent is deliberately comic, but not insulting, prosing. You're mocking your own linguistic limitations rather than French culture itself. The Comte's appreciative laughter shows that he understands and appreciates the diplomatic nature of your humour. The pig story becomes a vehicle for exploring cultural differences and similarities, with the pig discovering that French and English swine face similar challenges despite their different languages. The metaphor is gentle enough to be inoffensive, while suggesting that international cooperation might benefit all parties involved. But your real challenge comes when Lord MacLeod's patience with diplomatic pleasantries begins to wear thin. The Scottish lord's growing agitation is visible in his increasingly sharp responses to innocent questions, his tendency to grip his eating knife more tightly than necessary, and his darting glances toward the exits, as if planning an early departure. You approach this dangerous situation with a story about a bear and a badger who disputed over territorial boundaries, a tale that allows you to address the border situation without directly mentioning Scotland or England. The bear, you explain, believed in settling disputes through demonstrations of strength, while the badger preferred cunning and strategic thinking. The wise old owl, who mediated their dispute, you continue, your voice taking on the grave tones of judicial wisdom, pointed out that both animals shared the same forest, breathed the same air, and faced the same threats from hunters who cared nothing for their territorial squabbles. The parallel to English and Scottish relationships is clear without being accusatory. Lord MacLeod's reaction surprises you. Instead of the hostility you expected, his expression shows something approaching appreciation for your diplomatic approach to a sensitive subject. His slight nod suggests that he recognizes your effort to find common ground rather than assign blame for the border troubles. The story's conclusion emphasizes cooperation over confrontation, with bear and badger discovering that their combined strengths make them more effective at protecting their shared territory from external threats. It's a message of unity that both Scottish and English audiences can accept without losing face. As the feast continues, You notice the subtle ways your performances have affected the atmosphere. Conversations flow more easily. Laughter comes more frequently. And even the most formal diplomatic exchanges carry undertones of genuine human warmth. This is the jester's true art, not just entertainment, but the creation of social conditions that make understanding possible. The afternoon brings unexpected crisis when a messenger arrives with news that transforms the day's careful diplomacy into urgent political maneuvering. You're performing a routine about dancing chickens when the travel-stained rider enters the hall, his dramatic appearance causing conversations to die mid-sentence and all eyes to turn toward the high table. The messenger's whispered report to the king triggers an immediate change in the hall's atmosphere. King Henry's face darkens. Queen Eleanor's hand moves instinctively to her throat, and the assembled nobles exchange glances that mix concern with calculation. You cease your chicken routine immediately, recognizing that the moment calls for different skills entirely. The news you quickly gather from overheard fragments and observed reactions concerns a significant Scottish incursion across the border, not the small raiding parties that have been troubling the region, but a coordinated military action that suggests more serious intentions. The morning's intelligence about border security has suddenly become critically relevant, and your earlier warnings through comedic metaphor now carry the weight of proven prophecy. King Henry's immediate response is to call for his war council, but the presence of foreign ambassadors complicates what should be a straightforward military consultation. Lord MacLeod's position becomes particularly delicate. As a Scottish noble, he cannot be party to English military planning against his own countrymen. Yet, his departure at this moment would appear suspicious and potentially hostile. You recognize this as one of those moments when your unique position allows you to provide services that no formal advisor could offer. Moving quickly, but without apparent urgency, you approach the high table with what appears to be a routine request for permission to entertain the foreign guests while the king attends to urgent business. Your Majesty, you say with theatrical deference, perhaps our distinguished visitors would enjoy hearing the tale of the three kingdoms while you attend to pressing matters of the realm. The suggestion provides face-saving cover for the diplomatic separation that the situation requires, allowing the Scottish envoy to withdraw without appearing to flee from uncomfortable circumstances. But Lord MacLeod's response reveals the complexity of his position. Instead of accepting the offered excuse, he addresses the king directly. Your Majesty, if Scottish arms threaten English soil, honour requires that I know of it directly rather than through rumour and speculation. His words carry both challenge and vulnerability. He's demanding information that could compromise his own people while risking personal danger if the news proves particularly grave. The king's response to this direct challenge will determine not only the immediate diplomatic situation, but also the longer-term relationship between the two kingdoms. You watch his face carefully, reading the calculations behind his expression. Military necessity argues for treating Lord MacLeod as a potential enemy, but diplomatic wisdom suggests that alienating a reasonable Scottish voice could worsen the overall situation. Your intervention comes in the form of a seemingly innocent question. My lord, you address MacLeod directly in the tale of the three kingdoms. Should the noble of the northern realm be portrayed as friend or foe to the southern kingdom when raiders from the wildlands threaten both? The question reframes the situation by introducing a third party in the wildlands, representing the lawless border elements that neither England nor Scotland truly controls. MacLeod's immediate understanding of your diplomatic gambit shows in his slight smile. In such tales, Thomas Fool, wise nobles of all realms, unite against those who threaten the peace that benefits everyone, he replies, his words serving as both answer to your question and declaration of his own position regarding the border crisis. The exchange provides King Henry with the opening he needs to share information without appearing to compromise military security. "The Northern Realm's wisdom is appreciated," he responds formally, "especially when wildlands raiders grow bold enough to threaten established borders." The metaphorical language allows him to brief MacLeod on the situation while maintaining the fiction of discussing your storytelling rather than revealing military intelligence. What follows is a delicate dance of coded communication, with you serving as both translator and buffer between the two nobles. Through seemingly innocent questions about character motivations and plot developments, you facilitate an exchange of information that allows both men to understand the situation without either compromising his position or revealing sensitive intelligence. The crisis deepens when additional details emerge about the Scottish incursion. The attacking force appears to include not just border raiders, but organised military units, suggesting coordination at a level that implies official Scottish involvement, rather than the autonomous lawlessness that both kingdoms have been willing to tolerate. Lord MacLeod's reaction to this intelligence reveals both his personal integrity and the impossible position facing moderate voices on both sides of the border. His evident surprise and growing anger suggest that the escalation was undertaken without his knowledge or approval, leaving him to defend actions he neither authorized nor supports. "In your tale, Thomas," he says carefully, "what should be the fate of wildlands leaders who exceed their authority and threaten to drag their entire realm into unnecessary conflict?" The question serves as both request for advice and implicit criticism of the Scottish actions. Your response must balance multiple competing interests, providing counsel that could help diffuse the crisis, maintaining your protective status as harmless entertainer, and avoiding any suggestion that you're exceeding your proper role as court fool. The answer comes in the form of story structure rather than direct political advice. In the best tales, my lord, wise leaders find ways to disavow the actions of rogue followers without appearing weak, often by demonstrating strength through restraint rather than escalation. The suggestion is clear enough. MacLeod could serve Scottish interests better by distancing himself from the raids rather than defending them. The afternoon's crisis has transformed your role from entertainer to unofficial diplomat, facilitating communication that formal channels couldn't accommodate. But this expansion of your influence brings corresponding dangers, as success in political mediation inevitably leads to greater expectations and higher stakes for future interventions. As evening shadows lengthen across the great hall, the day's political tensions crystallize into something far more dangerous than diplomatic disagreement. A second messenger arrives, this one bearing news that transforms the Scottish incursion from a serious border dispute into a potential catalyst for full-scale war. The attack has resulted in English civilian casualties, including women and children in a border village, casualties that make moderate responses politically impossible and reasonable voices increasingly irrelevant. The transformation in the hall's atmosphere is immediate and profound. What had been tense but manageable political theatre becomes something altogether darker, with calls for military response echoing from nobles whose earlier diplomatic patience has evaporated in the face of innocent blood spilled. Lord MacLeod's position shifts from uncomfortable to genuinely perilous, as his presence now represents not just diplomatic complexity, but potential collaboration with enemies who have killed English subjects. You recognize immediately that your usual tools of humour and metaphor are inadequate for this new reality. The death of innocents, particularly children, creates emotional currents too strong for comedy to navigate safely. Any attempt at levity now would be seen not as diplomatic facilitation, but as callous disregard for genuine tragedy, destroying your credibility and potentially your life. Yet your unique position still offers possibilities that formal diplomatic channels cannot provide. As nobles around the hall begin calling for Lord MacLeod's detention as surety for Scottish good behaviour, you realise that preventing the Scottish Lord's arrest might be the only way to preserve any hope of peaceful resolution to the crisis. Your intervention takes the form of a direct appeal to King Henry's sense of honour rather than humour. Your Majesty, you say, dropping your usual theatrical manner for straightforward sincerity in the darkest tales, kings are remembered not for how they responded to enemies, but for how they treated those who sought to serve honour in impossible circumstances. The reference to Lord MacLeod's honourable behaviour throughout the day's crisis resonates with King Henry's conception of royal dignity. Despite growing pressure from his nobles, the king recognises that arresting a diplomatic envoy who has shown good faith would reflect poorly on English honour, regardless of his countrymen's actions. But the crisis deepens further when intelligence arrives, suggesting that the Scottish attack may have been coordinated with French encouragement, potentially as a diversion from English involvement in continental affairs. The implications are staggering. What appeared to be a local border conflict might actually be part of a larger strategic design aimed at weakening English influence in European politics. Lord MacLeod's reaction to this suggestion provides crucial insight into the true nature of the crisis. His evident shock and immediate demand to see the evidence suggests that neither he nor the moderate Scottish leadership were aware of any French involvement in the border raids. The revelation appears to genuinely surprise him, implying that the attacks may have been orchestrated by Scottish extremists working with foreign agents rather than official Scottish policy. This development offers a narrow path toward peaceful resolution, but only if Lord MacLeod can be convinced to actively oppose the raiders rather than simply distancing himself from their actions. The Scottish Lord's cooperation could provide intelligence about the attackers' plans, legitimacy for joint English-Scottish action against the extremists, and political cover for both kingdoms to avoid full-scale war. Your role in facilitating this cooperation requires abandoning comedy entirely in favour of direct political counsel. Speaking quietly to Lord MacLeod during a moment when the king's attention is occupied with military advisers, you outline the potential benefits of active Scottish cooperation against the raiders. My lord, you say in tones meant for his ears alone, your honour and your country's interests both argue for the same course. If French gold is behind these raids, then Scottish independence itself is threatened by success of these attacks. The argument reframes the situation from English versus Scottish interests to Scottish independence versus French manipulation. MacLeod's response reveals both his political sophistication and his genuine patriotism. You speak wisdom, Thomas Fool, he replies grimly, but wisdom alone cannot overcome the fact that I lack authority to commit Scottish arms to joint action, even in defence of Scottish interests. The limitation he identifies points toward the deeper structural problem underlying the crisis, the lack of communication channels between Scottish and English leadership that would allow coordinated responses to mutual threats. The border regions have become a power vacuum where extremist elements on both sides can operate with relative impunity, knowing that official responses will be hampered by international complications. Your final intervention of the evening takes the form of a suggestion to King Henry that Lord MacLeod be allowed to return to Scotland, not as a dismissed diplomatic envoy, but as an unofficial English agent, carrying intelligence about French involvement that could help Scottish moderates gain control over their own extremist elements. The proposal is dangerous for both kingdoms, but it offers the only realistic path toward resolving the crisis without war. The king's response to this suggestion will determine whether your growing political influence has become an asset or a liability to your continued survival at court. The Great Hall empties as formal dinner concludes, but the real work of the day is just beginning. King Henry retires to his private chambers with his closest advisors, while you find yourself in the unprecedented position of being specifically requested to attend these most sensitive deliberations. Your transformation from entertainer to political counselor is now complete, but with that elevation comes dangers that your former status as harmless fool had protected you from. The king's private council chamber is a windowless stone room, lit by thick candles and heated by a brazier that fills the air with smoke and dancing shadows. Here, away from public observation, the careful, diplomatic language of the day gives way to brutal assessments of military capabilities, political necessities, and strategic options. You realize immediately that your presence marks you as privy to information that enemies would kill to obtain, and that mistakes in handling could cost you your life. Sir Robert opens the discussion with a comprehensive review of intelligence gathered throughout the day, much of it confirming your earlier comedic observations about border security weaknesses and enemy tactics. The validation of your insights provides professional satisfaction, but also highlights how your informal information network has become integral to royal decision-making in ways that formalize your dangerous position. Thomas's morning intelligence about Scottish disguises among traders has proven accurate. Sir Robert reports with grudging respect. The attackers used merchant clothing to approach the village without suspicion, then changed to military gear for the assault itself. The confirmation of your shepherd and wolves metaphor establishes your credibility as an intelligence analyst, but also marks you as someone who knows enough about enemy operations to be dangerous if you were to change loyalties. The discussion turns to Lord MacLeod's proposal to serve as an unofficial English agent in Scotland, a suggestion that carries enormous potential benefits balanced against equally significant risks. If MacLeod proves trustworthy and successful, English intelligence capabilities in Scotland could be transformed overnight. If he proves false or is discovered, the consequences could include not just his death, but renewed accusations of English treachery in Scottish affairs. King Henry's questions about MacLeod's reliability reveal the calculating mind behind his royal dignity. "Thomas," he says, addressing you directly, "you observed Lord MacLeod throughout today's crisis. Your assessment of his character could determine whether we risk English lives on his promises." The question puts you in an impossible position. Your honest assessment of MacLeod is positive. He seems to be a man of integrity, caught in circumstances beyond his control, genuinely committed to preventing war between the kingdoms. But the stakes of being wrong are enormous, and your judgment could lead to catastrophic consequences if MacLeod proves less honourable than he appears. Your response attempts to balance honesty with appropriate caution. "Your Majesty, Lord MacLeod's reactions today showed genuine surprise at each escalation, suggesting he was not party to the raiders' planning. His anger at the attacks appeared authentic, not performed. But even honourable men can find themselves trapped by circumstances that force them to choose between conflicting loyalties. The assessment satisfies the king's immediate need for evaluation, while acknowledging the inherent uncertainties in judging human character under pressure. But it also demonstrates your growing sophistication in political analysis, further cementing your transformation from simple entertainer to valued advisor. The military discussion that follows reveals the full scope of the crisis facing the kingdom. The Scottish raids, while serious in themselves, are occurring at a time when English military resources are already strained by obligations in France, tensions with Wales, and the constant need to maintain internal security against baronial ambitions. A full-scale Scottish war would require mobilising resources that might leave other threats unaddressed. More troubling still is the intelligence about French involvement in encouraging the Scottish attacks. If accurate, this suggests a coordinated strategy aimed at forcing England to choose between continental and domestic priorities, potentially weakening English influence in both spheres. The implications for long-term English security are profound, requiring responses that go far beyond traditional military solutions. Your contribution to this strategic discussion comes in the form of analysis about information networks and communication patterns rather than military tactics. Your Majesty, you observe, the speed with which French encouragement reached Scottish extremists suggests communication channels that neither English nor moderate Scottish authorities are aware of. Understanding these networks might be more valuable than disrupting this particular plot. The suggestion shifts the focus from reactive military response toward proactive intelligence gathering, potentially offering more sustainable long-term security than purely military solutions. But it also demonstrates your growing involvement in the most sensitive aspects of royal policy, involvement that makes you increasingly valuable to the crown and correspondingly dangerous to yourself. As the council session extends deep into the night, you realize that your old life as court entertainer has ended as completely as if you had died. What emerges from this night will be something new entirely. A role that has no established precedent and no traditional protections, offering unprecedented influence balanced against unprecedented vulnerability. Deep in the night council, a third messenger arrives, bearing intelligence that transforms the day's crisis from a complex border dispute into clear evidence of international conspiracy against English interests. The Comte de Montfort, who had seemed so charming during the day's diplomatic festivities, has been identified as the intermediary through which French gold reached Scottish extremists, his cultural sophistication masking a mission of deliberate destabilization. The revelation hits the council chamber like a physical blow, each man present recognizing immediately how completely they have been deceived. The French delegation's presence at court wasn't coincidental. It was carefully timed to provide diplomatic cover for the Scottish attacks while gathering intelligence about English responses to the crisis. King Henry's reaction combines royal fury with grudging professional admiration for the deception's sophistication. "By God's blood," he says grimly, "we entertained the architect of our own troubles and thanked him for his courtesy." The recognition of how thoroughly he has been outmaneuvered cuts deeply into his conception of royal dignity and political competence. Your own reaction carries particular complexity as you recall your morning performance for the French delegation and your efforts to facilitate diplomatic communication between French and English nobles. Every courtesy you showed the Comte, every diplomatic bridge you helped build, now appears as unwitting collaboration with English enemies. Sir Robert's analysis of the intelligence reveals the full scope of French planning. The Scottish attacks were designed not just to damage English border security, but to force English military deployment that would weaken continental positions, potentially allowing French expansion in territories where English influence had previously been decisive. The beauty of their strategy, Sir Robert observes with bitter admiration, is that our natural responses serve their purposes. Military action against Scotland weakens our continental position, while diplomatic attempts at resolution appear weak to our other allies. The French have created a situation where every English response advances French interests. But the exposure of French involvement also creates new opportunities for English counter-strategy, opportunities that your unique position might be able to exploit. Your morning observations about information networks and communication patterns suddenly become crucial intelligence for understanding how the French conspiracy operated within the English court. Thomas, the king says, his voice carrying new intensity, think carefully about every interaction you observed between our French guests and English nobles. Any detail, however seemingly innocent, might reveal the extent of their intelligence gathering or the depth of their deception. Your mental review of the day's events takes on new significance as you search for signs of the conspiracy that had operated under cover of diplomatic courtesy. The Comte's questions about English military capabilities, his interest in border security measures, his subtle inquiries about noble loyalties, all now appear as systematic intelligence gathering rather than polite diplomatic curiosity. Most troubling is your recollection of the Comte's particular attention to Princess Margaret's presence at the morning storytelling session. What had seemed like courteous interest in royal family life now suggests intelligence gathering about royal children who might serve as future hostages or bargaining tools in extended French strategic planning. The revelation of French treachery also casts new light on Lord MacLeod's position and potential value as an English agent. If Scottish extremists have been receiving French support without the knowledge of moderate Scottish leadership, then MacLeod's cooperation could provide crucial intelligence about the extent of French infiltration into Scottish affairs. Your suggestion for exploiting this opportunity demonstrates your continuing evolution from entertainer to strategic advisor. Your Majesty, if Lord MacLeod can identify which Scottish leaders were involved in accepting French support, that intelligence could be used to divide Scottish opposition between those who prioritise Scottish independence and those willing to serve French interests. The proposal offers a path toward transforming the crisis from English versus Scottish conflict into a joint effort against French manipulation of both kingdoms. But implementing such a strategy would require sophisticated diplomatic manoeuvring and perfect intelligence about Scottish internal politics, capabilities that could only be developed through extensive cooperation with agents like Lord MacLeod. King Henry's response to your strategic suggestion marks another milestone in your transformation from court fool to political advisor. Your counsel has value, Thomas, but the risks are enormous. If we misjudge Scottish internal politics or MacLeod's reliability, we could find ourselves facing coordinated French-Scottish alliance instead of the divided opposition we hope to create. The King's acknowledgement of your counsel as worthy of serious consideration represents the completion of your professional evolution, but also marks the beginning of new dangers, as your advice could now directly influence decisions affecting thousands of lives and the kingdom's survival. As dawn breaks over the castle, you find yourself in a position unprecedented in the annals of court jesting. You have become the king's most trusted advisor on the crisis that threatens to engulf the realm. But with this elevation comes a terrible realization. 10. You have grown too powerful, too influential, too dangerous to remain in your traditional protective role as harmless fool. The night's revelations about French treachery and your crucial contributions to understanding the conspiracy have transformed you from entertainer, who occasionally provided useful intelligence, into intelligence chief, who sometimes performed. This transformation, while professionally gratifying, has destroyed the delicate balance that allowed court jesters to speak dangerous truths while maintaining personal safety. Sir Robert's attitude toward you provides the clearest indication of your changed status and its inherent dangers. Where once he tolerated your presence as necessary entertainment for the king, he now treats you as a peer in strategic planning, a recognition that simultaneously elevates your importance and eliminates your protection as someone too insignificant to threaten. Thomas, he says during a private moment while the king reviews intelligence reports, your insights have proven invaluable, but you must understand that your new position creates new vulnerabilities. Those who see you as the king's advisor, rather than his fool, may respond to you with methods typically reserved for dangerous political rivals. The warning is both recognition of your achievement and prophecy of your doom. By becoming too useful, too influential, too trusted, you have violated the fundamental rule of court jester survival. Never become so important that your enemies see you as a genuine threat rather than an amusing distraction. The morning brings additional intelligence that confirms your analysis of the French conspiracy, while simultaneously demonstrating how completely your old life has ended. Scottish agents working with French gold have been identified. Lord MacLeod's cooperation has provided crucial intelligence about extremist networks, and English counter-strategies are being implemented based largely on your recommendations. But success in preventing war with Scotland has come at the cost of your traditional anonymity. Your name is now mentioned in intelligence reports. Your recommendations are quoted in strategic planning documents, and your influence on royal policy is becoming visible to courtiers whose own positions depend on maintaining exclusive access to royal decision-making. The transformation becomes undeniably clear when younger courtiers begin approaching you with the deference typically reserved for senior royal advisors, seeking your opinions on political matters and attempting to cultivate your favour for their own advancement. Each such interaction further erodes your protective status as harmless entertainer while increasing your visibility as someone whose influence could benefit or harm ambitious nobles. Most dangerous of all is the king's growing dependence on your counsel for matters extending far beyond the Scottish crisis. During the morning's council session, Henry seeks your opinion on taxation policy, trade negotiations, and domestic security measures. Consultations that mark your complete transformation from entertainer to principal advisor, but also create enemies among those whose traditional roles you appear to be usurping. The final nail in your professional coffin comes in the form of formal recognition. King Henry announces his intention to create a new court position for you, Chief Intelligence Counselor, with formal authority over information gathering and analysis. The offer represents the pinnacle of achievement for someone of your background, but you recognize immediately that accepting would be tantamount to signing your own death warrant. As Chief Intelligence Counselor, you would no longer be protected by the traditional immunity granted to court entertainers. Your enemies would be able to move against you using methods appropriate for political rivals, rather than being constrained by the prohibitions against harming harmless fools. Every piece of advice you gave, every intelligence assessment you provided, every strategic recommendation you made would carry personal responsibility and corresponding personal danger. Your response to the king's offer must balance gratitude for royal favour with awareness that survival requires declining the very recognition that validates your professional achievement. Your Majesty, you say carefully, the fool who becomes too wise loses the wisdom that made him useful. Perhaps Thomas the Fool serves your interests better than Thomas the Counsellor ever could. But even as you attempt to decline formal elevation, you realize that the damage has already been done. Whether you accept official recognition or not, your de facto influence has grown beyond the boundaries that traditionally protected court jesters. You have become too important to ignore, too dangerous to trust completely, and too valuable to eliminate safely, a combination that has historically proven fatal for royal advisors. The morning's final intelligence report confirms your darkest fears about your situation. French agents have identified you as a key figure in exposing their Scottish conspiracy, meaning that foreign enemies now view you as a legitimate target for assassination or subversion. Your elevation from entertainer to intelligence chief has painted a target on your back that will remain regardless of whatever official title you accept or decline. The weeks following your elevation to de facto chief intelligence advisor bring a series of increasingly ominous developments that confirm your worst fears about the consequences of outgrowing your protective role as court fool. What begins as subtle hostility from displaced courtiers evolves into active plotting by those who view your influence as an existential threat to their own positions and ambitions. Lord Chancellor William de Ashby, whose traditional role as the King's principal advisor has been effectively usurped by your intelligence contributions, begins the campaign against you with bureaucratic warfare designed to undermine your access to information and limit your ability to provide the counsel that has made you valuable. Official channels for intelligence gathering are redirected away from your informal networks. Formal protocols are established that exclude entertainment personnel from policy discussions, and administrative barriers are erected to prevent your direct access to the King during routine court business. The campaign might have succeeded if it had been purely administrative, but de Ashby overplays his hand by attempting to turn your intelligence successes against you. He argues that your uncanny accuracy in predicting Scottish tactics and French involvement suggests treasonous communication with English enemies, proposing that your intelligence network represents potential security threats rather than valuable assets. This accusation backfires because King Henry has witnessed firsthand your dedication to English interests and your crucial role in preventing a disastrous war with Scotland. But the false accusations create a dangerous precedent that other enemies exploit with more sophisticated attacks on your position and person. The French, having identified you as the architect of their conspiracy's exposure, begin their own campaign to eliminate your influence through more direct methods. Gold flows to English nobles, whose positions have been threatened by your rise, creating a network of domestic enemies with foreign backing and specific instructions to neutralize your intelligence capabilities by any means necessary. Evidence of this French campaign emerges through the very intelligence networks they seek to destroy. Your contacts among servants, traders, and minor officials begin reporting attempts to recruit them as sources of information about your activities, your personal habits, your known associates, and your security arrangements. The pattern suggests systematic preparation for either assassination or elaborate frame-up designed to discredit your intelligence and eliminate your influence. Most disturbing of all is intelligence suggesting that some English nobles have moved beyond simple acceptance of French gold to active collaboration in planning your downfall. These individuals, driven by resentment of your rapid rise and fear that your influence threatens their own positions, have apparently concluded that eliminating you serves both personal and patriotic interests by removing what they characterize as foreign corrupted influence from the royal court. The irony of being accused of foreign corruption by nobles, who are themselves accepting foreign money to eliminate English intelligence capabilities, is not lost on you, but irony provides little protection against enemies who have moved beyond political maneuvering to planning physical harm. Your response to these mounting threats requires deploying the same intelligence and strategic skills that created the dangers in the first place. Using your network of informal contacts, You begin gathering evidence of the conspiracy against you, while simultaneously developing defensive measures that might provide some protection against its implementation. The evidence you gather reveals the full scope of the threat. At least 6 senior nobles have accepted French funding for operations against you. 3 separate assassination plans have been developed and abandoned as too risky, and a comprehensive frame-up involving forged correspondence with Scottish agents is being prepared as a more subtle method of eliminating your influence. But your investigation also reveals the conspiracy's central weakness: the plotting nobles' need to maintain appearances of loyalty while planning treasonous activities creates communication vulnerabilities that your intelligence skills are perfectly suited to exploit. Messages between conspirators, coded references in official documents, and subtle changes in behavior patterns all provide opportunities for gathering evidence that could expose the entire network. The question becomes whether you can gather sufficient evidence to protect yourself before the conspirators complete their preparations for your destruction. The race between your defensive intelligence gathering and their offensive planning represents the ultimate test of the skills that elevated you from entertainer to advisor, with your life as the stakes. Most challenging of all is the need to conduct this counterintelligence operation while maintaining your official duties as royal advisor and your protective cover as court entertainer. Any sign that you suspect the conspiracy against you could trigger immediate implementation of assassination plans, while any reduction in your service to the king could eliminate the royal protection that represents your primary defense against domestic enemies. The end comes not with dramatic confrontation, but with the slow strangulation of political change that makes your very existence impossible. The combination of growing Puritan influence in Parliament, increasing pressure for governmental reform, and the king's own recognition that formal advisors provide better protection for royal decision-making than informal counsellors creates conditions where court jesters become not just unnecessary, but actively dangerous to royal interests. Your final performance takes place on a grey autumn morning, when King Henry summons you for what both of you understand will be your last official appearance as court entertainer. The Great Hall, once the stage for your greatest triumphs, now feels like a courtroom where sentence is about to be passed on an entire way of life that can no longer be sustained in the changing political climate. Thomas, the king begins, his voice carrying genuine sadness alongside political necessity. The realm has changed in ways that make your unique services both more valuable and more dangerous than ever before. The enemies you helped us identify now view you as their primary target, while our own supporters question whether informal advisors serve royal interests in an age demanding formal accountability. His words acknowledge both your professional success and its inevitable consequences. By becoming too useful, too influential, too effective, you have destroyed the protective anonymity that allowed medieval jesters to function as unofficial counsellors and truth-tellers. Your very competence has made your position untenable. The king's solution, while generous by medieval standards, amounts to professional death sentence disguised as reward. You are to be granted a pension sufficient for comfortable retirement, a small manor house in a distant shire where your intelligence skills might prove useful in local administration, and formal recognition of your service to the realm. Recognition that, ironically, makes any return to court impossible by acknowledging your transformation from entertainer to political advisor. The age of fools speaking truth to power through jest is ending, Henry continues, his observation carrying broader historical implications. Parliament demands advisors who can be held accountable for their counsel. The Church condemns frivolity in governmental affairs, and our enemies have learned to view court entertainers as potential intelligence threats rather than harmless distractions. Your response must acknowledge the king's generosity, while recognizing that your life's work is being terminated not for failure, but for excessive success. Your Majesty, you say. Setting aside theatrical manner for straightforward sincerity, Thomas the Fool has served his purpose, but perhaps that purpose itself no longer serves the realm's needs. Better to end with dignity than to persist beyond usefulness. But even as you accept the inevitable end of your court career, intelligence continues to flow through the networks you established during your years of service. The French conspiracy against you has evolved into a broader campaign against English intelligence capabilities, with your elimination being just the first phase of a systematic effort to blind English decision-makers to continental threats. Your final service to the Crown involves transferring your intelligence networks and analytical methods to Sir Robert and other formal advisors who will continue the work you began. But the transition reveals how much your personal relationships and reputation for harmless entertainment contributed to your intelligence-gathering effectiveness. Without the protective cover of Fool's Motley, your successors will need to rely on official channels and formal methods that may prove less flexible and comprehensive than your informal approach. The ceremony of your departure from court involves one last performance, a farewell entertainment that serves as both personal goodbye and symbolic end to the medieval tradition of court jesters as informal royal advisors. You tell the story of a wise fool who helped his king navigate dangerous times, but who recognized when wisdom required stepping aside for others better suited to new challenges. As you remove your motley for the final time, setting aside the bells and party-coloured fabric that defined your professional identity for 2 decades, you recognize that you are witnessing the end of more than just your personal career. The entire tradition of court entertainment, as political commentary, truth-telling through humour, and informal counsel disguised as harmless amusement, is being swept away by historical forces, demanding formal accountability and bureaucratic transparency. Your retirement to rural administration represents not just personal transition, but cultural transformation. The skills that made you valuable as intelligence advisor, analytical thinking, human insight, communication abilities, strategic planning will serve you well in local governance, but they will be applied through official channels with formal recognition and traditional accountability, rather than through the unique medieval institution of licensed foolishness. The manor house that becomes your new home sits in countryside, far from the political intrigues that defined your court career, but close enough to London that your intelligence about continental affairs occasionally proves useful to government officials dealing with French threats that continue long after your departure from court service. Your retirement is comfortable and your contributions are appreciated, but the days of speaking truth to power through jest are gone forever. Years later, as news arrives of Oliver Cromwell's final elimination of all court entertainment positions, you realize that your departure from court preceded by only a few years the complete destruction of the institution you had served. The medieval world of licensed foolishness, where entertainers could speak dangerous truths under protection of harmless appearance, has been replaced by a more efficient but less flexible system of formal advisors with explicit authority and corresponding vulnerability. Your legacy survives not in the continuation of court jesting. That tradition died with the political changes you helped navigate, but in the intelligence methods you developed, the analytical approaches you pioneered, and the recognition that truth-telling in dangerous times requires both courage and cunning, whether delivered through jest or formal counsel. The bells of your discarded motley lie silent now, but the echoes of your laughter and the power of your insights continue to influence those who remember that sometimes the fool is indeed the wisest person in the room.